My name is Alex Case-Cohen. I'm the relatively new district manager for the Pend Oreille Conservation District, and I'm speaking with you all today about a few of the programs that we offer. And I appreciate many of the questions that you have concerning what's called non-point source pollution and the impacts of water quality on weeds. You know, I've done a little bit of research on what water quality, the relationship between aquatic weeds and degraded water quality. So I'll share with you some information that I found on top of some of the things that you can do depending on what sort of property you have, whether it's ag-related or recreational, or if it's just a residential property. So again, I don't have any cards here today, but we do have a sheet after this presentation. If you're interested in any of our programs, feel free to fill out the sheet with your information and we'll get in contact with you. So, let's see. Hold on. There we go. Okay, I'm just gonna, okay, cool, we're good. Okay, so today, as I said, what we're covering is what water quality looks like in the Pend Oreille River and what may be contributing to that. Also, the relationship between water quality and some of the major aquatic weeds that we've talked about today, Eurasian milfoil, Purplelewis strife, and flowering rush. Also taking a look at livestock and waterways and how those nutrients can impact water quality, addressing some of those, eutrophication, which I'll get into more, kind of a deeper look at what that is. Dissolved oxygen, temperature as well. We'll also look at residential soil erosion around the Pend Oreille River. That's what you see in this image here is an example of a moderate to highly to severe erosion, bank erosion, which if you're along the Pend Oreille River, I'm sure you know of many locations, if not, if you don't already have some on your property. So we do work with the PUD on an erosion control and cottonwood planting program to help mitigate that. But I'll get into that more. Also, I found some really unique methods for managing aquatic weeds. Scott actually went into great detail about using Eurasian milfoil as a fertilizer. There's some sites that I found where you could use it as a forage, as a supplemental forage for livestock, which, in a drought year like this, maybe there's a way we can kind of team up with some of our ag producers and provide some additional forage when there's not much in the fields. So, great. Okay, so in 1972, the Environmental Protection Agency was formed and they created the Clean Water Act. And through that, and within Washington State, the Department of Ecology regularly monitors water quality within the state of Washington, especially on the Pend Oreille River. So things that are monitored are dissolved oxygen, temperature, turbidity, which is just the clarity of the water, how clear it is, how much sediment is present, various nutrients, including that nitrogen and phosphorus, potassium that we've been talking about, toxic metals and other chemicals, bacteria, E. coli, coliform coming from various sources, pH, so whether it's acidic or basic, and other points of consideration. So in the Pend Oreille River, due to what I'll discuss in a little bit, there's a category 5 listing for temperature and dissolved oxygen. Okay, so there are 5 categories, 1 through 5, 1 being of little to no concern, relatively few, not a pollution concern, with high being a highly a resource concern, essentially. So then a total maximum daily load is established, marking a benchmark, essentially. So we can't exceed this limit here. This is where we're starting. Now we need to make efforts in order to mitigate this issue and rid our rivers of this problem in ways that we can. So, as we've already kind of talked about with temperature, the historic salmonids that lived in this river, they don't like warm water. And because of the warming that's happened within the Pend Oreille River, this is basically a highway for them to get to cooler tributaries along the river. So, in addition to what's majorly affected that is land use change, essentially, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So dissolved oxygen depends on plant growth, the number of rocks, how well your river is flowing. If you've got a lot of rocks, you've seen rapids, there's a ton of oxygen that's moving through the river and moving downstream, which is necessary for aquatic life and fish to survive. But in once a system sort of flattens out, there's more sediment, there's not so much movement happening, there's not as much rippling or waves that create that oxygen. In addition, plants and aquatic life does contribute to that dissolved oxygen, but there's a balance, right? So when we have more aquatic weeds, we have more algae, as Terry discussed, you know, that balance is disrupted, and that's where eutrophication can happen. So overabundance of aquatic weeds, those plants grow, reproduce, die. Once they die and there's a large die-off, that bacteria actually consumes that dead organic material, and in the same time it consumes oxygen, and then it produces carbon dioxide. So then it makes what's called a hypoxic environment. So aquatic life that historically is present can't really survive, you know. So that's detrimental to fish populations, to recreation, to anything, you know, to what we're really trying to do and what we love to do on our rivers. So just important things to note there. So we're talking about non-point source pollution. So point source pollution, it's a pipe coming out of somewhere and going right into the river, but non-point source is a lot more vague. So one big thing is land use changes I talked about. So, you know, this is a pretty interesting picture because it does appear as there's a lot of forested areas along the river, but I mean, the channels have changed completely, you know, not just because of damming, but residential development along the river has altered what has historically been present, you know, the removal of large trees, the removal of riparian shrubs in favor of a beach, right? So that has totally changed the temperature of our rivers, impacting habitat. Let's see, anything else on land use change that I'd like to cover? In addition, you know, a big thing is the sedimentation. So when we're removing trees slow velocity, and riparian shrubs, they slow velocity from the river, but they also hold soil particles in place. And when we remove those, they can be easily dislodged, especially in high flow times, you know, in the May-June period along the Pend Oreille River. So we need to employ methods to minimize how much soil is lost. Again, you know, in some of these areas, the soil is high in organic material, which also contributes to that eutrophication. There's material available the bacteria can consume, which then produces carbon dioxide. So, you know, we're removing that oxygen, we're increasing temperature, and there are some things that we can do on our property, as someone mentioned earlier. In addition, other non-point source pollutions are livestock and agriculture. You know, if you have livestock along the riparian area, they love to hang out in the water, and I don't blame them, especially when we had that 100-degree weather for over a week. You know, it was hot, and a lot of the times they don't have shade, so where else would they hang out, you know? But that does impact water quality with sedimentation, hoof shear. So their hooves are trampling around, you know, they're just mixing up soil and then it's moving downstream. And, you know, they're depositing nutrients. There's no getting around it, you know. And the nutrients that livestock produce, high in nitrogen and high in phosphorus, as Terry was discussing earlier, you know. So those really do contribute, that results in a high contribution of nutrients that can create an unhealthy system, which is what we're really trying to mitigate. And in those unhealthy systems, you know, that's where we can frequently find aquatic weeds. So again, the main ones I'm going to discuss: flowering rush, milfoil, and purplelewis strife. So I found an article that said, in many instances, and I won't say all because not all plants are the same, but soil erosion and fertilizer or waste runoff from livestock, if you will, are major causes of aquatic weeds. There's an abundance of nutrients, there's abundance of sediment that they can establish, hold on, and propagate, essentially. They do prefer disturbed areas. You know, if you're removing vegetation, native vegetation, what has existed is in a weakened state, and you know, invasive weeds, they just want to survive. You know, that's what they're doing. That's what they're here to do. And, you know, again, I can't blame them because they have, you know, they're doing what they do. But they do prefer those disturbed areas. So we're probably seeing a lot of this along our river because we've altered it. It's developed now. So just something to consider. And they also can survive in really poor conditions. And I did read somewhere that Eurasian milfoil, it's such an interesting plant because it can store its nutrients in a high nutrient situation. It can store its nutrients and it can transfer them to different parts of the plant at different times of the year. So it just basically wants to survive as best as it can, and it makes it more difficult for us to kill it, except for with that Purcell, of course, sounds like. So let's see, poor water quality. yeah, so it's just basically a vicious cycle, right? You know, you have degraded water quality, weeds come in, and weeds continue to make it to degrade that water quality. So as we've seen with Eurasian milfoil, it forms dense mats that largely reproduce through vegetation, as we talked about. It does grow best on fine-textured inorganic sediments, so those are soils that are not exposed to oxygen. But again, if we have increased sedimentation, you know, it provides more area for these weeds to establish. Again, high sedimentation rates, nutrients, as I've already discussed. Again, dense populations can contribute to eutrophication. Let's see, so decomposition of Eurasian water milfoil. Again, it just is that increase in biomass, that major die-off, and then the bacteria consuming it. I mean, so if you have a large population, there's a lot that you need to do in order to mitigate that. So with Purplelewis strife, which I'm learning here is largely under control in this area, which is great to learn, but it also loves to survive. In a year of high, in a really productive year, it can produce over 1 million seeds per year. It's transported by wind, water, and on the animals, the wings and backs of different animals. It can survive in a variety of environments, in standing water, wet meadows, or wetlands, which we have a ton of in this area because that's just how our river system, you know, formed this area. It chokes out waterways, flows natural flows, and promotes silt and sediment deposition. And Sharon, I did have a question for you. So how does it increase sedimentation? Or was it flowering rush or Purplelewis strife?
Well, it's alternate life, but flowering rush is much accelerated.
Okay, cool. I might ask you on the next slide to answer that question then. So it degrades, because I'm just fascinated, and I think it's interesting to learn how these processes take place. So it degrades long-term water quality by increasing turbidity, again, that clarity of the soil, crowding out native vegetation, and can therefore increase temperature. So again, spreads by, this is all stuff you've already learned, and I'm not an expert on this by any means. So how does it increase sedimentation, Sharon?
Well, I doubt I could give the correct technical, and maybe Terry knows more, that it would have to do with how the flowering rush is what we call pre-adapted to move in flowing water.
Okay.
And if you go to its native home, that's where it grows, at the low creeks and rivers and the like. And so that's the mechanisms it has for reproduction.
Okay.
Are designed for that method.
Okay.
Okay. So deposition occurs with by the interaction between the leaves and currents.
Okay.
And probably the shape. You know, even more so than the size.
Yeah, sure. Totally. Absolutely.
So that between those two factors, you know, that's what really contributes to the, because it tracks the sediment that's moving.
Sure. Gotcha. Okay.
Trapping it.
So because it prefers that environment, it therefore is shaped in a way that it traps that sediment as it's moving through an already turbid system, basically, right? And it, okay. Cool, that makes sense. Thank you. Cool.
And thank you for thinking this.
Yeah, no, you're great. Okay, so next we'll talk a little bit about potential solutions and what the conservation district can do for you. So these two images here, you know, you've got a riparian fence on my right, and then a watering facility to introduce, well, to essentially provide a source of water for livestock instead of going into a riparian area. So through the Voluntary Stewardship Program, which I'll give a little bit more detail, we actually helped cost share on these projects this year. These were just completed in May and June of 2021. And you know, what you see here is they go hand in hand, right? You can't just take away a water source from livestock. You also can't take away a cooling source. So making sure, a big thing that I've seen this year is not providing shade for livestock in this extreme heat. So making sure you do have a shade source, but then providing a watering source with fresh, clean water. It's what they need. And in some studies, it's what they prefer over wading in the water. You know, it's high sedimentation, especially where areas where they're loping. So making sure, you know, working with the conservation district, we may be able to help you install either something like this in order to keep your cows or other livestock out of your riparian areas. Okay, so through the Voluntary Stewardship Program, the goal is to protect and enhance critical areas while maintaining agricultural viability. So critical areas include wetlands, fish, which you can see here, fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, which would include along the Pend Oreille River or other riparian areas in the county. You've got steep slopes, so slopes with an incline greater than 30%, frequently flooded areas, which we have plenty of here, and critical aquifer recharge areas. And though we don't necessarily have those here, it's more around wellheads. That's what we're considering. So VSP, the way it works is that we meet with a landowner. You contact the Pend Oreille Conservation District if you've heard of this program in any capacity. I, myself, or even Mary will come out and conduct an initial site visit, and we'll report current best management practices. So that's really what we're trying to log here is like, okay, what do you already have on the ground? What do you plan to implement? Because that's what we need to show in order to essentially prevent regulation or unnecessary regulation. In the state, in Pend Oreille County, landowners are farming in means that do in general have a pretty minimal impact on our critical areas. You know, we have a lot of hay, we do have livestock, but not like the basin where you've got, you know, annual crops that are just rotated out every year with tons of tillage. So we're pretty lucky there, but there's always ways to improve those systems. So you report what you're currently doing, what you'd like to do. We'll complete an individual stewardship plan and a checklist together. In addition, we'll create a farm plan, and you can see an example of a farm plan here. So we've just kind of identified different areas. You know, this landowner he's doing a ton of work. He's got multi-species rotational grazing. This is the guy with the watering facility here. So he built this himself, and the goal was to introduce a rotational grazing system. He's got a terrible knapweed problem, so he's trying to figure out a way to manage that. He's done a bale grazing project, which worked out really successfully. I'm going down the rabbit hole a little bit. So anyways, we'll put together a plan like this, and then you'll come to the VSP work group, which meets quarterly. They will review your project, and you'll receive approval, whether they approve it or not. They may have some tweaks, you know, what they'd like to see instead, but this is basically what you're working with. So again, the first, really after the project is approved, if you have any permits, if you're working in any waterways, you got to apply for permits early and get on people often. That's one thing that I've really encountered and struggled with this year, which I'll talk about later. But again, just get all your permits as soon as possible. And then you begin your project. The important thing, if you're doing a cost share project in any capacity, keep all invoices and record all work done. Because we can't pay you if we don't have proof that you did work. You have to complete it in the allotted timeline. You know, once funds are up, they're up. They're not coming back. So they'll reallocate those funds to another program within the state, but you got to do it in the timeline. Once you're done, you submit all your paperwork and it's done correctly, you can receive your reimbursement within 4 to 6 weeks. So it's a pretty nifty system, and you know, it takes a lot of work, but I've worked with a lot of great people on this project or implementing some really cool projects to protect and enhance critical areas. So again, that does work hand in hand. When you're doing something like this, it works hand in hand with minimizing both terrestrial and aquatic weeds, right? We're doing things, we're increasing our management, and we're making sure that we're not impacting our waterways by using methods that are proven to work and can be more beneficial for our livestock. Okay, so next we have bank erosion and potential solutions. So we work hand in hand with the PUD and their erosion control and cottonwood fund. So essentially, if you have, I don't have an image of this, and I can certainly give you more information, but there is through the Pend Oreille County Community Development Program, there's a hazard occurrence map that you can use. You can find your address, you hit a button, and you see if you have low, moderate, or severe erosion on your bank. If your bank is moderate or severe erosion, you qualify for PUD funds. And through that, you know, I'll go through that in more detail, but things you can do, planting native riparian vegetation, that's always approved. So even if you don't have a really steep bank issue, but you want to, you know, you want to put some plants in just in case that may ever happen, that's always a great starting point. And the PUD does provide $500 for that. The main thing is that you have to plant cottonwoods, and that's to provide eagle habitat. So that's a really big push from their program. So again, resloping, as you can see here, we do have installing small to mid-sized rock at the bank's toe, just to prevent that scouring or that undercutting, if you will. But really resloping and that vegetation is what holds this project in place, essentially. So it's preventing the loss of soil particles and its velocities, as we talked about. Again, you've got to monitor and remove aquatic invasive weeds. That's just something you have to do to ensure that the system looks, you know, looks the way that you want it to, and to not impact your neighbors. Okay, so we have another picture, and I apologize. I just came into this program in November, so I didn't find you know, all the images that I want, but we have a before and after. And if you look in the before, you can really see where this landowner's house is, how close it is to the bank. So doing something, you know, doing some rock at the toe and resloping and revegetating is really what was necessary, what needed to be done in order to protect the bank. So we have another image here. So on where we see all the, oh, I can't remember what those are called. They're not revetments, but those are essentially cottonwoods. Oh gosh, what's it? Just cottonwoods that have been installed into the bank, and over time, those cottonwoods will grow. They will revegetate themselves and revegetate that bank. So just showing, you know, planting cottonwoods at their required planting rate is what the PUD will provide funds for. That is $500, and then $5,000 for the erosion control methods, as we talked about. You know, rock up to a certain point, and then resloping, revegetating, and ensuring. A big thing too is that you ensure that you maintain 80 to 85% survivability of those plants over a 3-year period. So let's see, where am I at on time? Okay.
You go tell too.
Oh, great. Okay, cool. Okay, so we just came out with a couple videos. Scott's actually in one, so we'll take a look. And we've got two. So one is a potential project. It's a capital project that will protect some critical infrastructure in the town of Medellin, and then post-project completion discussion. So we'll see how the audio is. It might not.
I tried it last night with one of these videos networks.
Oh, really?
So
Okay,
we'll see.
cool. Awesome. Yay, great. Okay. Okay. It's pretty good. Oh. Oh. Might be on a different screen.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Hold on a second. We're gonna have to exit full screen really quick.
Okay, and then move it over. I'll open it.
I need to go back to
This one, maybe.
or wait. Let's see. Where are we at? Oh, there we are.
Yeah.
Oh, I can see it. Okay. Okay. Oh shoot.
Hide.
We're gonna have to screen share. We'll just do the entire screen.
Okay, cool.
Share.
And then we'll.
And oh, go back to this.
That's still not.
Okay.
showing. Here.
Oh, it's not showing
No.
on this
Here.
screen though.
Hold on. Sorry, guys.
No.
I'm gonna escape.
I don't know why it's not showing up there.
I don't know. That's a great question. Okay. Hide and pause. Can you escape? There we go.
There it
Okay.
is. Okay.
Well, okay.
Are we still sharing? Yes, yep, we are.
Okay. We are up in the town of Medellin on Riverside Avenue, speaking with Brian Smiley and Pete Daggett about a potential stream-based stabilization project that will protect critical infrastructure. So.
Yeah, I'm Brian Smiley, as former street commissioner, water commissioner here in the town of Medellin. Presently, I'm county commissioner for Voluntary County in District 3. Beyond that, I've lived here on Riverside Avenue since I think 1996. So I'm pretty well aware of the issues that go on here on Riverside Avenue. One of the things that we should be aware of is the main sewer main for the town of Medellin. Does go through the roadbeds here. All of the town drains this direction, and then it goes on down to the sewer treatment plant. So that's pretty critical infrastructure here. When the floods do come and when the river rises to a certain point, the current does direct into this bank, into Riverside. Further up, about where the yellow sign is up here, where the other street comes in 97, the river did come over this street. Where the trucks are here and where the camera is here, it would have been maybe 5 or 6 feet of water. The bank on the east side of the river probably has been reduced by about 8 or 9 feet since I moved in here in the 90s. We used to be able to park our cars across there and have a picnic table across there. And now if we walk further up there, you can see there's 3 or 4 feet. In fact, they have put, there was many more trees along the bank here. And every year, every few years, the river's been undercutting the trees, they fall in the river, and they're gone with the high water. So that's a little bit of the history that's gone on here. And then further up on the very south end, we can see some actual kind of landslides that are threatening into people's yard there.
Hey, my name is Pete Daggett. I'm mayor of Medellin. I was on the town council back in 2007. I became the mayor in 2010. And really, what all the town is capable of doing is trying to maintain and keep things from deteriorating. Yeah, it's become a real concern to everybody, especially the people who live on the road, but everybody.
Right. Yeah.
It's really a good question to ask is why would those that don't live here on Riverside be concerned with this project? For those that live in the rest of the town of Medellin, the concern they should have is the threat to the main sewer main that drains the sewer system for the town of Medellin is here on Riverside. The whole town is sloped gradually towards the river, and the last sewer main that goes on down to the sewage treatment plant is here in this roadbed, Riverside Avenue here in Medellin. So this bank erosion is a long-term threat to that sewer main, and we can see by the progression of the erosion that it's just a matter of time before that causes a serious and immediate threat to that sewer main. And if that were to happen, if there was some kind of catastrophic failure of that sewer main, it would also pose a threat to those that live up and down the river from here on down even into Columbia, if that sewer would drain then into the Pond River. So that's a threat as well to the whole river system. Alex, you want to add anything to that?
Sure. So another key component is restoring fish habitat. Again, we are in a dam system, so it's nowhere near what it used to be. But if we begin to restore our shorelines to look like they naturally had, you know, less rock, having more vegetation, a gentler slope, and potentially less sediment in the river, we can begin to restore that habitat, impact temperature. You know, if we're revegetating along the river, it may over time lessen, lessen the temperature, which is ideal for salmonids and other fish that have historically called this river home, which is of course important to the economy and the overall well-being of our ecosystems. So I'm here at Medellin on Riverside Avenue with Scott Williams from the PUD. I've invited him out here to give his take on the potential stream stabilization project that will take take place here, ideally next year, in order to protect the critical infrastructure on the street. So, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Scott Jungle. I've started out at the Conservation District in Newport, working on that stabilization project like this for mostly private landowners that have problems, don't know how to deal with it, and they need the different agencies' resources. And it was just a conduit to connect people with the funds that were available to do work like that and get them the help they need. So I learned a little bit about bank stabilization projects like this during that. And then at the PUD, we have a bank stabilization fund that's available to help pay for some of the costs like this in the Box Cave Reservoir. So that's why I'm here.
Great. So do you mind sharing with us a little bit about what can be done on this steep bank that will protect it for that 100-year term that you were speaking about?
So there's a lot of different options on how you might approach a project like this, but the most common one in our reservoir is to put a hardened toe or the bottom of the bank with some type of riprap or larger gravel with sediment filter underneath, because if you put large stuff in there, the water scours behind it if you've got fine sediments underneath, and it just scours your riprap away and holds that bank. So you have to make sure that you put either a packed gravel bed underneath there that can't pull out through the cracks in the larger rock, or some type of a mechanical sediment filter underneath the riprap on the toe of the bank. And then you fill in with either smaller gravel or plantable soil on the less steep portion of the bank above that, so that you can put vegetation in there that will reduce the velocity of water coming by during flood events. If the bank is too steep and too close to the road, like we have in a couple spots along here, sometimes you have to run the riprap shell, if you will, higher up the bank because you don't have a slope that's gradual enough that you can keep topsoil and vegetation on. In those cases, you can put pockets of topsoil in there to plant through because the vegetation, once it grows, will run the texture of the stream bank and slow the velocity of water down as it comes by. If you've got boat wakes or wave action, it'll slow down that energy and disrupt it before it hits the shoreline, keeps your erosion down altogether. But those are just some of the techniques we use. The other habitat piece I'd like to add to it is if you can get decent trees, especially cottonwood and ponderosa pine, revegetation along the shoreline, that riparian habitat is essential to other sensitive species in the area, like bald eagles. So right across the way, we have a nesting pair of bald eagles that have been there for 15 to 20 years now. And of the eagle habitat that we have along the river, about 95% of them are in one of those two tree species, cottonwood or ponderosa pine. And they love riparian edge habitat like this along the shoreline. So trees grow up, they make habitat for different bird species, and when they fall into the water, a lot of people don't like to see that, but that's what makes fantastic fish habitat. It both slows down the velocity of water with a tree down in the shoreline, and it produces cover for young fish.
So we've identified the goals and the need for this stream bank stabilization project. Next is the process. So the town of Pend has worked with the Pend Oreille Conservation District for the first fund. The first grant that they received was for engineering funds, and we've had our engineer come out and create a design. So we've got the riprap at the toe, we have resloping, potentially adding some fill or soil, as we've talked about, and then of course the important part is the revegetation. The stage that we're at now is applying that plan, because again, it's a plan, it doesn't necessarily represent exactly what is going to happen. We need to have, again, submitting permits, those would go to the county. They also go to the Department of Ecology, the Army Corps of Engineers, and Department of Fish and Wildlife to make sure that the project meets all of the requirements. At that point, we would have a contractor come out on site. They would give us a bid, further details on what the design will look like And from there, it's a matter of working in what's known as the work window. So it's typically mid-July to the end of August when the water is at its lowest flow, and there is the least potential for impacting fish or other river habitats and river species. So we are waiting to hear back on the permit, and then the next step is, of course, speaking with the contractors. So I look forward to showing you all what will take place with this project in the future. Okay. So I was going to have another video, but I think I can just close this here.
Oh, we got it. Oh, we're good. Yep.
There we go. Okay, sorry guys. I've got to just flip through. Hold on. Go to the screen where we were. I'm not going to do the other video. Okay, so yeah, so that's just kind of an idea of what the proposal looks like, proposal step. I've already showed you a few examples of the completed project. You know, the video that I was going to show you will be available on our Facebook, and we have a YouTube page, as you could see. So if you want to see that, it's with a landowner named Roger Bozell and his project, and he was very pleased with it and has already noticed, of course, a decrease in erosion on his property. So again, the process, we'll go through that with potential cost share for stream bank stabilization projects. You will contact the POCD, you'll call the office, my cell phone, or you can also contact the PUD, who will send you to us. Next, you can apply for engineering funds with the POCD. That's not necessary, but it is encouraged. You know, we have, as you can see from the site plan here, we have an engineer come out. He does the design. He, you know, makes a recommendation on how much rock you need, what slope you need. We have also included if you can see here, a root wad. You know, having the Army Corps of Engineers out on site, they're requiring one root wad, which is just a dead tree with part of its trunk installed into the bank with roots sticking out, and that, like Scott had said in the video, that provides habitat for fish when there's high flows, you know, so the May, June time of year. So that's the site plan. Next, you will submit your permits with the site plan, and again, it can be really daunting and can be a really long process. I'm here to help support as much as I can, but again, I'm not writing your permits for you. That's your responsibility. The county is pretty helpful. You know, they will send you an example of what it should look like, and then you sort of adapt it to what your project will be. And, you know, making sure you identify the ordinary high water mark. In a lot of instances, the permitters will want to come out on site to take a look at the project, you know, and it's always a good idea to have them on site. It's almost a surefire way to move your project forward, basically. If they can recognize your name, they know you, they will most likely assist in the process. You know, they are really busy people, especially the Army Corps of Engineers. That tends to be the permitter that is the biggest holdup, but I mean, he's serving a really large area and it's one individual. So after you receive your permits, you secure your contractor and get a bid. Then you begin your project in the work window. And this might be a question for Scott. This year, we've had such an early dry year. Would the work window have been pushed up potentially because of how dry it was?
I doubt it, because they established those work windows based on the migration size and use of fish.
Okay.
In the system, and those won't change. Fish might be more stressed out, margins really got warm so quickly. But they won't change the work windows. But if there's some reason that, for whatever reason, on your stretch of the river, it makes the project more efficient or causes fewer problems with construction, to bump that work window from one, you know, either later in the fall or earlier in the spring. Fish and Wildlife is the one that sets that, and they have some flexibility. So as long as you can justify it, we've had projects run in through the end of October before, which is somewhat past the work window, because we get proof that there would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Just call them, often and early, I guess is what I would say. Turning your permits in early and then just contacting them a lot. If you're not seeing your permits, just call them and, have them know you on a first name basis. Basically, that's what I recommend. Again, if you're receiving cost share, with different cost share programs, having it on that timeline is really essential. But the PUD has a really cool system, really cool program where if you sign all the documents, we may have people ahead of you because there's only 10 projects per year that are approved. You could receive reimbursement the following year after your project's completed. So, it's on a first come, first served basis. Who contacts us first, so that's really important. It's a really great thing that those funds are available for landowners and their who have erosion control issues. Again, reimbursement may take at least 1 year depending on time of planting, so that's a big thing. Your project needs to be, for you to receive funds for the year that you completed your project, plants need to be in the ground before the PUD goes out and looks at completed projects, which is in November. So if you don't get your plants in the ground because of some reason, then you'll have to wait until the next year to plant in the spring or fall, and then have the PUD check off your project. So please note, stream bank stabilization projects may take 2 to 3 years or more to complete from start to finish. So just know that you can't contact me right now and expect to get it done this year because it takes a long time. The Army Corps says it's unlikely to receive or to submit a permit if he doesn't receive the application by January. So for you to complete it the following year. So just keep that in mind early and often, as I have said. Okay, in summary, water quality concerns, they're certainly identified in Pend Oreille County for temperature and dissolved oxygen. Land use change and ag have contributed to degraded water quality, but this is just what's happening everywhere. We're increasing in population, the areas where we're developing is increasing, so it's just kind of part of what's happening. Aquatic weeds can be exacerbated by this degradation of water quality, and they can kind of create a vicious cycle. So starting early is a really important component. The Pend Oreille Conservation District offers programs to protect and enhance those critical areas on ag lands and to stabilize your eroding stream banks. And you can help improve water quality in addition to controlling your aquatic and invasive weeds. So if you want more information, please contact the Pend Oreille Conservation District at 509-447-1155. You can also call my cell phone, 671-5085. You can send an email to admin@pocd.org. And you really should check out our website. It looks great. www.pocd.org. You can see a lot of cool images, learn more about these projects, submit a request for information. We've got a table back there and also a sign-in sheet if you guys would like more information. So, any questions?
We have one online really quick.
Sure.
Somebody asked how you protect your riverbank from muskrats.
Oh, from muskrats. I don't have the answer to that question. Maybe someone else would, but I mean, they're part of the system, so I'm not quite sure on that one. If you wanted to protect your plants, you might be able to put some wire around your specific riparian plants, tall, deep, kind of dug into the ground. But other than that, I'm sorry, I don't have more advice there. Are there any other questions?